The idea of the trifold great goddess was first proposed in the early part of the 20th century by Cambridge scholar and linguist Jane Ellen Harrison. She sought to explain some of the elements that appeared repeatedly in Greco-Roman mythology by blending archaeological evidence and literary analysis. Harrison devised a system of classification that separated the goddess into three distinct forms that ruled over three different aspects of the world: the living, the dead, and the heavens. Now, Harrison's theory about the great goddess splits her into the three component forms: the maiden, the mother, and a third form best left up to the imagination. The maiden is full of innocence and purity and courage, and is equal parts a warrior queen or a virtuous leader. The mother is more stable. She's compassion, she's love, she's guidance. Whereas the maiden will go out into the world and evoke change through action, the mother is usually the person who hangs back and observes her people's struggle, interceding only when it benefits them through stability or through comfort. And as for the third aspect, well, Harrison never actually named that one. But scholars like Gimbutas have pointed to the crone, or even the dark mother, the opposite or the refutation of motherhood, as having the third part in the goddess structure. Now, modern classical scholarship has moved on from the ideas proposed by Harrison. They are very much a place and time when they were first published. But this idea of the threefold goddess has evolved consistently and been embraced by artists and poets and philosophers, and especially writers and storytellers. The great goddess has been known to show up in movies, she shows up in books, she shows up on television, and she even shows up in a lot of modern pagan or Wiccan ritual systems. For this episode, I want to focus on one very specific movie goddess: Miyazaki's own Nausicaa, Princess of the Valley of the Wind. For in her story, we see a girl transformed from maiden to goddess in a very short time, but also who sets the stage for every Ghibli protagonist to come after her. Nausicaa holds a very distinctive space within the realms of Miyazaki's goddesses. She, more than any other, comes to understand the ramifications of who she is and how she impacts others. When we first meet Nausicaa, she is still firmly a maiden, probably the best maiden Miyazaki has ever written. Young and idealistic, compassionate and courageous, Nausicaa exudes all the traits that a maiden ought to exhibit, right down to her rulership of the valley itself. She is the leader and future of her people, and they look to her as their princess for guidance and hope, reverential while still engaging with her as the maiden she is. This is just one major difference between the film and manga. Nausicaa in the film is portrayed as a messiah, defending her valley from the villainous Tolmekian Empire, but at heart she remains a maiden. She ends the story still firmly entrenched as the virgin hero, regardless of how many lives she's saved. She never suffers a serious crisis of faith, nor does she question her own motives and role in the world. She acts like an ideologically powerful innocent would, through strength of arms and strength of soul. Manga Nausicaa grows into this role gradually, fearlessly facing down armored soldiers, exhibiting magical powers, and instilling the awe that defines a goddess's relationship to her people. She flirts with being more than a maiden, but for every moment she wishes to surge forward, she is often forced to take a step back. The first major moment of this comes when Nausicaa assumes a motherhood role. This actually happens 3 times over the course of the manga, with each instance becoming more taxing on her, but ultimately revealing her true strength. While flying aboard a Tolmekian ship, a pair of orphaned refugee children are thrust upon her, and the wild, angry Nausicaa that brings the fight to her foes is suddenly forced to take their well-being into account. She has to take a step back, lest the innocent children be harmed, or worse. There is an image of Nausicaa, walking with them slung around her neck, her weapons secured at her back, facing forward with a grim expression. That image does much to convey the lessons Nausicaa learns from those children, that violence, even righteous violence, has consequences, and sometimes one's personal drive must be compromised in the name of someone less powerful. Nausicaa only has those children for a short time, but even after she passes them along, she approaches her future conflicts with a more wary eye. Part of the maiden has given way to the mother, and she can no longer ignore the sacrifices of her people for her sake. Later down the line, this more aware, less idealistic Nausicaa becomes a mother again, but this time to a gigantic god soldier. We see the god soldier very briefly in the film when its rotting, melting form cries once and obliterates an entire front line of Omu before dying at the feet of the Tolmekian Princess Kushana. In the manga, Nausicaa encounters the god soldier fully formed, and she imprints herself on it as it awakens. Like an animal or a human baby, the god soldier identifies her as mother and reacts to anyone who might threaten her with reflexive violence, completely unaware or uncaring about collateral damage. Despite the nature and sense of retribution burning within her for the war her people were forced to participate in, Nausicaa must once more take a step back and calm the enthusiastic weapon, whom she ultimately names Oma, or Justice. Oma takes a liking to his new name, and Nausicaa must take time to teach him both the significance of it and how to properly employ it. Oma never fully sheds his destructive impulses, but up until the moment she loses contact with him, he manages to learn to focus them on where they would best be useful. Throughout the story, from the very first volume, readers are introduced to the worm handlers, so named because of their companion grubs, which they raise like pets and use to locate spores from the forest before they can germinate and poison the outside world. These worm handlers rally around Nausicaa from the moment she leaves the forest. She defends them when she can, treats them with a sort of respect, and gives them a sense of hope, like she does with so many others she encounters. And they are more than willing to sacrifice anything for her, which they do when she needs help finding Oma. With the plane she secures unable to carry herself, the worm handlers, and all their gear, these men make the ultimate sacrifice, choosing to kill their worms so they can lighten the load and follow Nausicaa on her journey. Now bear in mind, these worms are the very thing that the worm handlers derive their identity from. They are the reason they are hated. They are the reason why they are driven out of cities. They have a symbiotic relationship with them, almost like they're their own children. They say that they are willing to sacrifice anything for her to get Oma back. They're in essence killing a part of themselves for her benefit, and only her benefit. Nausicaa isn't just moved by this, but it shakes the very core of who she is. At that moment, she realizes that she has gone beyond being a maiden, beyond being a mother. At that moment, she has transcended into godhood. She has become jaded and desperate, but also dug deeper inside than she ever thought she could. She lost her child and seen others kill their kin to help her retrieve him. And she has blamed herself for all the loss and death, even when she was powerless to evoke any real change. But to those worm handlers, and the people of her village, and the refugees from the war, she has gone from Nausicaa the princess to Nausicaa the goddess. And most importantly, she realizes the full impact of that transformation, and ultimately draws strength from it. She can't change the past, nor save the dead, but she can instill hope and potentially change the future, provide comfort and a brighter tomorrow for everyone she touches. No more Messiah, not even a corn goddess, moon goddess, or shadow queen. No, this Nausicaa is a goddess that transcends labels and saves the world.
It's recording now.